Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 13 of the Associated Wrestling Press's Second Caution. I'll be your host, ESPN and Big Ten Network wrestling analyst Eric Olenowski. And if you're a fan of wrestling and you know what's going on in the wrestling world, you know that the unfortunate situation of Cleveland State cutting their wrestling program. We got the news earlier this week. We've heard from the administration, we've heard from the coaches, but who we haven't heard from, who is the most important people, are the kids, the guys stepping on the mat, the wrestlers. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome two of Cleveland State's captains, both two-time NCAA qualifiers, Ben Willeford and Riley Shaw. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I know you guys are probably dealing with a lot of emotion right now, so just for you guys to take the time out, I really appreciate it. To start off the show, let's start off on a high note. You guys coming off great seasons, both you guys. Riley, 33-8 on the season. Ben, 29-12. Both made it to your second NCAA championships. Riley, let's start off with you. How'd you feel at the NCAA championships?
I felt good. I think having that year, that my freshman year I qualified, having that year under my belt, I was definitely more prepared. Would want to. I went 1-2, won a match, so lost my second match in a tough call in overtime. But it was a great experience, and I'm looking forward to next year and hopefully getting on the podium.
Okay, let's Ben. How about you? This is your second NCAA championship. I actually had the opportunity to call your second match with Rodriguez for ESPN. How did you feel at the NCAA championships?
I also went 1-2, so we both wanted to do better, especially for me being my last year. So I'm not happy with the way that it turned out, but I got no regrets, and I left everything out there, so that's all you can do.
Oh, I can say you did. I remember calling that match, and it was the score didn't. I think it was a 5-point move at the end, but it was a great match. I was talking to somebody earlier. That and the Rashado and BJ Clagon were two of my favorite matches that I called. So you excited me. Let's move on to the topic of discussion around the wrestling world. So unfortunate. Cleveland State earlier this week announced that they would no longer have the sport of wrestling. They would be dropping the sport of wrestling and bringing on lacrosse. I'll direct this question to you first, Ben. First off, how does it feel to hear the wrestling program that you've given so much to, because you mentioned that this is your last year, you don't have any eligibility left. How does it feel to hear that the program that you gave so much to, the university that you gave so much to, is not going to have wrestling anymore?
It's heartbreaking, really. A lot of emotions. Obviously shock. Right off the bat, you don't want to believe that something like this can happen. But then, disappointment, anger, a lot of feelings. None of them good. So definitely not good to hear that news in any way.
What about you, Riley? How did you feel when you first heard it?
Yeah, definitely shock would be my first reaction. It was kind of weird how it happened. We had a team meeting on Friday, and then, we were scheduled to wrestle on Monday, and coach comes in about an hour before practice and tells us, don't put your wrestling stuff on, we're going to have another meeting. So we were all kind of scratching our heads, what's going on, and so we get in there and sit down, and that's when they broke the news to us. So yeah, it was definitely shock. We weren't really ready for it, and I guess the way that it was delivered also, it left a little it was tougher to take too, because how they delivered it.
So you guys found out on Monday, you said?
Correct.
And I want to say that they they told our coaches, and they said, you have about 2 hours to tell your team because we're going to make it public.
Right.
So that's
wow.
That's
so if he didn't say anything, you guys potentially could have found out because my next question to ask you guys was, who'd you hear it from? Was it coaches? Was it the athletic director? Was it social media? So you're saying that you guys found out from your coaches and they gave him a timeline. If they don't tell you guys, they're releasing it anyways.
Right. I think they told I believe Ben was in the first round of, well, not the first one with the AD, but Stahura had brought Ben in shortly after it happened. I believe Stahura found out around 1 o'clock, and then he told us around 3. So, I mean, it was bang, bang. Stahura found out, and we found out 2 hours later.
Okay, so with you guys being captains, did he split it up? Did he call you guys in and say, hey, you're gonna have to deal with these younger kids because you have some of these kids 18, 19 years old, and this is their future. Some of them came from all points in the country, and then they gave the trust to Cleveland State. And what was that like? Was it only one group, or was it 2 groups, or what?
It was. I had happened to walk in the coach's office, before the meeting, and so that's when I found out. But the coaches told us, but the AD was with him, so it was our coaches, the AD, and I believe an academic advisor.
Yeah, like an assistant AD type.
And so the coaches came in, and the ADs were with them, and our coach told us, and then the AD was there to offer his explanation
and field questions.
Okay, so what was your initial reaction from the team? Because you guys have, around 25 to 30 guys on the team. Was there anyone saying anything? Was it silent? Were you guys just in shock, not saying anything, sitting around looking at each other, or what was it like?
Yeah, for the most part, it was a lot of silence. At that point, none of us were really educated on how it happened and what process it went through. He kind of explained it a little bit to try to give us a better understanding. And we really didn't have the right question to ask at that point because, it kind of had just like been put on us. I know a couple guys did ask a few questions, and he gave his answers. But when it comes down to it, like learning everything we've learned since then, we didn't really get to ask the questions that we wanted to, which have been asked to him now through podcasts and interviews. So it's good for that the media is asking him those tough questions that we want to ask him.
So can you elaborate? What questions were asked?
Well, I think so essentially a big question was kind of like why lacrosse. He did tell us at that point that lacrosse was being just basically filling our spot, or taking our budget, and it's going to lacrosse instead of wrestling. At that point, we had no idea. I had no idea, at least, his background in lacrosse. I mean, it's a pretty deep background. He played, coached. His wife's a coach. He was on the NCAA committee a couple times. So, unfortunately, at that point, we didn't know that, and we weren't able to ask those questions, which was that looking back at it, I wish I would have known that before, so we could have, asked him at the very point he told us.
And also, now it's coming out that it's probably going to cost around $75,000 more
right,
to bring the lacrosse in. And whenever it was explained to us, that definitely wasn't in the conversation.
Right.
So you guys were it was
it
explained to you guys that it was just dead even. You guys, I believe the number was $800,000, $700,000 to run the program a year. They said lacrosse is dead even, so now it's $875,000 for lacrosse. Yeah,
essentially, they what the numbers were exactly was wrestling is like $384,000, and what it's going to take to fund a lacrosse team is like around $450,000 to $460,000. So yeah, when he first told us, it was like $400 for $400, but in reality, it's going to be a little bit more expensive to fund that program.
That's just absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not here to bash on the administration. It's
important to note, too, that this was one person making this decision. This was a unilateral decision. I've talked to numerous athletes who, they're scared for their team because this came out of nowhere. And it was really one person making this decision.
Yep.
So you guys didn't even have the decency. I mean, I mentioned you guys – there's some kids on the team 18, 19 years old. You can't just you give somebody 2 hours. It's basically you're basically taking the rug out from underneath their feet, sweeping it out and saying, hey, you have 2 hours to basically get your life back in order at 19 years old. You're telling me they didn't have the decency to give you guys a couple of days, bring you in one by one into the administration, into the offices of these high-ranking officials at Cleveland State and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. We understand that you gave us your trust. That's not what happened.
No,
No.
They said they said that their door was open. We come in anytime if we had any questions. But there was no person by person, process on an individual basis.
Wow, that's shocking. And
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not here to bash, but if you're going to do this to kids, something has to change. Someone has to be held accountable. You can't just do that. These kids are 18. I mean, it's ridiculous. And Riley, you briefly mentioned if some of the questions that you should have asked, or you could have asked if you would have had more in detailed knowledge. What would be some of those questions you would ask right now?
I guess my main one is if he believes that it's a conflict of interest. I mean, it's hard to deny the fact that it is with his, deep background. And look, did bring it up before. It was a one-person decision. He made the recommendation. I mean, at Cleveland.com, there's an article on Cleveland.com that he actually quotes. He comes out in the quote and says that, the board told him to make a recommendation, so his recommendation was going through no matter what. So yeah, my big question for him would just to be, would there be another process, or maybe to bring in like a second or third party that could have made this a little bit more fair of a decision instead of just letting one man decide the fate of what sport's going to be gone and what sport's going to come to the university.
What about you, Ben? Is there any questions that you wish you would have asked?
Yeah, I mean, probably just like what did he take into account Northeast Ohio and its community? And, I mean, does it really serve the taxpayers' dollars to add lacrosse when there's basically no support for lacrosse in Northeast Ohio, and you have this strong community of wrestling? I mean, it's insane. Like, I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me and to other guys on the team that, we've coached in the off season or we've just
Club
been around,
kids.
seen at tournaments.
Right.
And the support has been awesome. Like, people that, you never would have thought of reaching out, and it's been awesome, really.
Yeah, and Ohio, you mentioned, lacrosse is an outdoor sport. How are you going to play lacrosse in the middle of the winter? Wrestling, you look at the numbers for the NCAA championships. Pennsylvania had 13 All-Americans. Behind that, who? Ohio, with 11 All-Americans. There's a reason that Cleveland State has to have wrestling, and it's because it's in the state of Ohio. It's one of the greatest states for wrestling, and it's disgusting what they have done. And were you guys in denial at first when you heard it? Were you thinking this can't be true? This can't happen to Cleveland State in the state of Ohio with wrestling being as prominent as it is. This can't happen.
It was definitely hard to take. I wouldn't say that I was ever in denial because just the way that it was handled. I don't think that denial wasn't really an option because John AD's name is John Perry. We really don't see him much outside of bad news. So the only times that he's actually been in that wrestling room were 2 or 3 since I've been here. I've been at the university, it's my third year, for 2 or 3 years. So as soon as I saw him walk into the room, I knew there was some bad news coming. So the denial factor wasn't really there for me.
What about you, Ben?
I don't know if it was. I mean, maybe a little bit of denial because Riley wasn't here for this, and a lot of people don't know this, but I think it was 4 or 5 years ago the baseball team was cut. And at that time, we had got wind that a team was going to be cut, and it was going to be either baseball or wrestling. And so he came in and met with us and told us that it was baseball. And he told us that we were safe and that he thought the wrestling program was going in the right direction, that we had the administration's full support. And, here we are 4 or 5 years later, and that's not the case.
Yeah, and the same unfortunate event happened with one of my close coaches in Carl Adams at Boston University. Have you guys had an opportunity to reach out to anybody else that has been in this situation? I know it's still early in the process, but have you just, to find a ways to handle it? Ben, you're done with wrestling, so this, I'm not going to say it's not important to you because I know it's highly, it's up there on things that are on the top of your plate, but Riley, you still have another year of wrestling. Have you reached out to anybody to figure out what do I do from here?
No, I haven't. Well, at least in the Boston University sense, I haven't reached out to anyone, which I think is a good idea. Of course, those guys know, the process and what they went through getting the program cut. So I think that's a great idea to reach out to those guys and hear what they have to say.
So what's next for you? If, say, tomorrow the AD comes back and says Cleveland State wrestling is here to stay, after everything you've been through this week, what are you going to do? What are your thoughts?
I'm here for the long haul either way. I think that we have a pretty good chance of having a team next year. We've been told that we're funded through next year if we can fill a lineup. So I think that that's going to happen. I think that we're going to have a team. And then, of course, I'm sure you know of the private money factor, where if we can get enough money to endow the program, that we're going to have 2 or 3 more years for the program. So, yeah, if that happens, which I think there's a chance of, if we can get this turned around and, get the university behind it and to get that decision, somehow switched, I'll definitely be suiting up in a singlet next year for the rest for Cleveland State.
What about you, Ben? Because we mentioned several times on the show you don't have any more eligibility, and I'm sure your thought process, you could have been one of the lightweight coaches with all your success that you've had. Why would they let you go? Why wouldn't they keep you at Cleveland State to be a lightweight coach? What are your plans now?
Well, it's hard. Like, we're just trying to take it day by day, and there's a good chance that this thing could get reversed. And that's, we'd love to raise the money and field a team for just next year, but that's not our goal. We're trying to get this decision reversed.
Right.
And we have a lot of good people, like, in our corner, having meetings with the AD, having meetings with the president of the university, that have strong ties in Cleveland and are good people to have in your corner. And we feel pretty good about it.
Well, you guys, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I couldn't have picked 2 better people to have on the show. You guys are educated about the topic. You guys have ties to the program that, the captains. Who else would you want to have on the show? Before we end, is there anything else you guys want to say? Just, to the wrestling world, just to know that, let them know how you guys feel.
Yeah, absolutely. My big thing is just keep pushing. The support has been unreal. Ben touched on it a little earlier. Just keep with that support. Keep with the hashtag, Save CSU Wrestling. Keep it going. Right to university officials, right to the AD, right to the president. That goes a long way, and I think that that's something that needs to continue to keep this fight going.
Yeah, keep it going. Just like, I want to say that Cleveland State's website crashed 3 times yesterday just because of all the hits it's been getting. Like, seriously, that's the difference. And, we really do have a lot of momentum right now, and it's because of all the support that we're getting. And please keep it up because we need you guys.
Yep.
And you can go to crowdrise.com/ is it Save CSU Wrestling?
Yeah, I believe so.
And you can donate money, or you can write a letter to the university and let them know how you feel.
Email.
Hashtag Save CSU Wrestling. Just keep up with the support. We really appreciate it.
And guys, I ask that, not you guys, but for all the listeners out there, and if you're going to send something, make sure it's classy, that they're not going to read something that is just going to bash, the university. They made a decision on their part, but show them how classy the sport of wrestling is, what we are really about. Do it smart. Don't just bash these people because that's going to get us nowhere. But I will put the link, what was it,
crowd.com.
Okay. Let me write that down, and I'll put that in the link, so make sure after you watch this episode, you guys go to the show notes, check out the Crowd Rise, and that has been it for episode number 13 of the Associated Wrestling Press's Second Caution. Ben, Riley, I can't thank you guys enough. Like I said, I couldn't have picked 2 better guys to come on the show. I'll do everything I can to continue to support you guys. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'm sorry this had to happen.
Thanks for having us. Yeah. We appreciate you having us, and helping get the word out there and doing everything you can to help.
No problem.